Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. We'll be getting started here in just another minute or so, giving everybody a chance to get off of their last meeting and go to their next meeting. You know how it is. There we go. All right. Well, welcome, everybody, to our alumni AI native software development. You are in and around the improving ecosystem. And so, whether you're a current client, alumni client, current improver, former improver, one of the things that we've wanted to do is to start sharing with that community a lot of the lessons we've learned over the last couple of years. And so this presentation and some of the details around it is meant to be a conversation so that we can get the most out of it. So what I'd like to do is call your attention to the Q&A feature. Feel free at any point during this to drop questions, etc., in there. I'm going to be pausing a couple of times, and our phenomenal producer is going to be helping us to kind of answer those questions throughout. And then we're going to have some polls and some kind of feedback around kind of where you're at in your journey so that we can shape the message to that space that you're in that journey today. And so we're going to go ahead and get diving into this. But as we go in, if you haven't met me, I'm Devlin Lyles. I'm our Chief Consulting Officer. I'm responsible for employee growth, go to market, and client delivery globally for improving. And part of that includes a lot of our emerging technologies. And so I get to stay on the pulse of a lot of what we're doing in the AI space. Doesn't tell you at all why you should care about my opinion, though. And so in improving last 5 years, we've done about $250 million in AI projects. And that's landed a $4.4 billion return to our customers. My background, software development and emerging technologies, heavily focused in data and heuristics and real-time decision systems. And so you're going to hear a lot of those pieces. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to walk through a little bit of where the industry is at, and then we're going to walk through how to take that information and apply it into changing the way you personally work through the process of building software and how that'll affect your teams, your organization, and kind of where we're going in the future. So we'll go from where we are today and every step along that path. Now, to understand where we are today, we need a little bit of insight from you. And so what I'd like you to do is that you should have gotten a poll around, hey, how often are you using AI tools and where are you using those AI tools in your kind of day-to-day work or weekly work, monthly work? The reason we bring that up is we're actually going to do some comparative analysis here in a bit to where this shows us against the industry trends, because you're going to see some of the Gallup workforce poll and Gallup workforce survey data from end of last year, and we'll be diving in through that. And so in our kind of earlier version of this, we ended up with kind of an even distribution. Today, it looks like we're pretty heavily in that daily usage. Now, no matter where you are on this journey, you should today be able to kind of see what your next steps are and then take those next steps and know with pretty good confidence what those are going to look like. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the constraints in the industry because these are going to affect the way AI development in software and how we integrate it into our workflows shapes over the next several years. So, what you're seeing right now is the constraints that are coming into play around AI training of models. That is everything from power consumption limits to data scarcity, chip production, and then latency, which is how close we can pack all of these GPUs together and the fiber optic time that it takes a photon of light to go between one point and another. When you're operating on those constraints, we're going to hit some pretty hard physical walls that require technical innovation in cooling, engineering, data center production. And that's going to slow down progress of the models gaining new functionality. Now, why does that matter? When these models are no longer gaining functionality at the speed they are today, then we have to, rather than wait for a perfect model, a model that's not going to make mistakes, a model that's not going to have hallucinations, we actually then have to simply plan on the model hallucinating and create processes and systems that deal with those hallucinations. And so that overarching approach is how we're framing the rest of the presentation and the conversation. Is we can assume the model will make mistakes sometimes. How do we manage that? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share these results in case anybody's curious. That's what the answers look like. And so it looks like primarily today, we've got kind of the daily, weekly users, and we've got a few that are in the all-time, a lot of coding, a lot of kind of usage across, pretty scattered. That's a good thing because it'll bring all those different perspectives to the table. Now, the fundamental shift that we're talking about and that everybody's been in the news about and talking about the death of software development as an industry is around shifting from I'm primarily doing the work and I've got an AI to help me to I'm primarily guiding AI in doing of those things. And so moving from that individual contributor to overseeing agents doing that contribution sounds scary. It would be a lot like somebody who enjoys making furniture in a wood shop suddenly being asked to run a furniture factory. Now, the good news is we're going to build our furniture factory in increments. We're going to learn what works, what doesn't, how to manage inputs, and those kind of things. That progression we look at as kind of stages of AI adoption. Now, it's important to note in this, not every team is going to progress at the same speed. And not every team needs to get to the level 7, level 8 maturity. If you're working on safety critical or life critical systems, you may stop at 4 or 5, right? If you're working on something that's a little more acceptable to have an error every once in a while, you might progress all the way to 7 or 8. This is about picking the level of AI productivity gain that is most appropriate for the work you're doing. It's also a progression that builds on itself. So you can't skip from no AI straight to I'm just telling the computer to do it and away it goes. That's where we see a lot of the horror stories that come out of the vibe coding space, where it deletes production databases, it doesn't build secure software, et cetera. We're going to be talking primarily about how to do this in a way that is enterprise software centric. So I've done a lot of vibe coding on weekends and stuff like that. It's fun, it's enjoyable, but I'd never do it for something that was running our business or our client's business because it's got gaps. And so all of this is going to be building on learning where those gaps are and then building processes to manage through those gaps. Now, to put this in a little bit of perspective, you guys were really well involved on daily, weekly, and all the time, which puts you way above the tech workers review for the Gallup data. Roughly speaking, about a third of folks are using it on a daily basis. We're well over that. We're over half of the folks on the call are using it daily. That's fantastic. And then we started looking at what types using. Notice that Gallup's only got about 14% using it for coding, whereas we've got about 2/3 of this call. Now, this call is about AI native software development, so we're going to have a little bit of kind of numbers distribution there, but we are significantly above where most of the workforce is. Now, that story doesn't match a lot of what we hear in the news. And that story is because most of us are professionally building software, whether that's us doing it personally or managing teams that are doing it. And yes, I include product ownership and business analysis and testing and DevOps and observability as being a part of delivering software. And the reason that that difference between Gallup's numbers and where we're at is because as we grow between stage 2 and stage 4 in maturity, where I've got a chat system that's reading what it's allowed to do and those kind of things, but it's not actually doing work for me into what we call a stage 3 or a task agent. It's allowed to do work for me. That jump requires that I trust it. I trust it even though I know it's not perfect. To build that trust, I actually have to go through the progression of asking it questions and seeing, where does it give me good answers? Where does it give me bad answers? And then I've got to use it and go, all right, where is it doing good work? Where is it doing bad work? And that's where we introduce what Improving's been calling the intelligence operating system. This is the combination of human and artificial intelligence, because we do believe it is hybrid, that there is no replacing human expertise in the process. Now, execution may be getting commoditized, but the expertise guiding that execution isn't yet. And we also believe that as a part of that structure, you have to have a safety net for those autonomous actions. And we're going to talk about how to build those boundaries, trust, and governance into the workflows. And then lastly, when you get to later in the process, you're into the stage 5, stage 6 type shifts, you fundamentally change the way you engage with work. Stages 1 through 4 are really just about faster, agile. Like, I'm delivering faster, I'm putting more in sprints. When you get to stages 5 and 6, you start breaking down how teams are structured. And that change kind of comes late in the process once you've already understood where and how you can accelerate in big ways. Now, this ultimately, we're talking about the movement of a role from I'm doing the work, AI is helping me, AI might be answering my questions, to I'm guiding AI to do a task and then giving it another one, et cetera. And I'm reviewing the outputs and maybe editing those. And then those stage 5 plus is about directing and orchestrating. To do that, my value has to shift from doing the work to creating the outcomes. And when I shift my identity from doing the work to creating outcomes, that's a pretty big shift. And that's going to create a lot of psychological pieces that we'll have to talk about today. Because when I ask somebody, hey, what do you do? And they tell me I am a software developer, they've tied their identity to doing the thing, right? And if AI takes away doing the thing, then it's been a harm to their identity. Whereas if I go, hey, what do you do? And they're like, well, I produce software. AI didn't change that story, not even a little. And so that identity attachment is part of the psychology and organizational change management that we're going to have to tackle as we go through these sets of changes as an industry and in your teams. It's also important to note as we go through this that more junior developers are going to get a bigger lift in the early stages. So your stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, you're going to see greater gains from your junior developers. Your senior developers are actually going to see multiplicative gains in stage 4, 5, 6, and 7. And so that's where you see this kind of split where senior folks don't actually go significantly faster until they've already gotten to that stage kind of 4 plus space, because they're constantly having to repeat these detailed instructions, reprompting and re-engineering. And so you end up seeing, and this matches the MIT Sloan data, and this is actually from the Fortune 500 enterprise analysis done last year. And so all of the details around this, we're going to dig into why they're there and how to take advantage of them, how to overcome them. So to do this, what we're going to do for the rest of our time together today is we're actually going to walk through each stage and what it takes to move to the next one and how you would go about doing that. So I would encourage you, I'm going to remind you about the Q&A feature, ask questions, and we'll dig in. But the first one we're going to dig into is actually what a stage 2 agent looks like. Now, whatever coding tool you use, in this case, I'm going to use Windsurf. We've also got Visual Studio with Claude Code and GitHub Copilot. It's the same for all of them in stage 2. Whereas stage 2 isn't allowed to make changes on my behalf. It's allowed, however, to answer questions for me. And so I can go version of Angular is the using. How would I go updating it? And so this is going to analyze the code base. It's going to dig in. You're going to notice it's going to go yanking through all the dependencies and details. And it's going to help me to create a plan for how to modernize Angular in this application. Now, that approach, I'm still going to be doing the work. It's giving me, hey, here are some commands that you can run. Here's the approach. We're going to have to look for third-party dependencies. Here's my global version versus update. But this is still assuming that me as a human am going to go do that work. Now, this is valuable because when I jump into a code base that I'm maybe not familiar with, I can be much more successful quickly. When I jump into a code base that I haven't touched in a while, or maybe I'm a front end developer and I'm stretching my skills into the back end, it'll help guide, but I'm still in the driver's seat. I'm still in control of every action because I have to take every action. It's just an advisor, an angel on the shoulder, if you would. Now, I saw the question come in, said, looking at the skills leveling and realizing it might be too early, what are your thoughts on junior developers getting early productivity gains, but potentially losing experience on how to understand codes and solution without AI assistant, considering the risk or kind of just, is it considered a risk or is it just kind of the old way of going about it? So this is a fun one because it gets down to the intent of the user. If the intent of your junior developer is to get those productivity gains and just output stuff, they're going to learn less than they would have as a junior developer 10 years ago. And this is where we have to guide junior developers and coach and mentor them, junior testers, junior product owners. It works in all those roles, not only to use AI to get the productivity gains, but to use AI to learn why. And so most of the time when I'm interacting here, I can go, why would third-party dependencies be a problem? Now, if I'm a junior developer, I can ask why, and I can actually go, oh, it can be problematic during upgrades for these reasons. And I can use the AI not only to get the performance gain, but to also get the knowledge and experience growth. But that requires personal discipline from the person using the tools to engage with AI in a way that helps them learn. If you're just going to kind of run through it quickly and get the outputs, that's going to be significantly less impactful for you. So the vast majority of people that have interacted with AI, whether it's Copilot in the Microsoft space or a coding assistant, this is where they start. This is their first experience with AI, is that Q&A over a code base. And it's okay. It's valuable. It helps a little bit, but I'm still going to be primarily constrained by how fast I can do work. And then we go, okay, what would it take to go from stage 2 to stage 3? If I go stage 2 to 3, the first thing, and I'd encourage you to do this right now, if you're kind of in that chatting with the system stage, document out your workflow. Boxes and arrows, that's it. So, all right, I get a user story after sprint planning. I break it down into tasks. I pick up the back-end development tasks. I work through those. I test them. And then I work the front-end development tasks and I do those and I test them. And then I weave it all together with an end-to-end test. And then I submit a PR for review. Like that overarching workflow. Each of those boxes is going to be the place you target to move from stage 2 into stage 3. So one of the questions that came in was, what are the suggestions for avoiding the risk of over-reliance on AI? That could be detrimental to subject matter expertise. I look at this very similarly, a little bit of history. My mother was in education for 26 years before she retired. And her and I have talked about like calculators as a great example. Calculators help you to do math. As long as you understand what they're doing, that's very valuable and it actually gives you a lot of uplift. And so when you look at the educational theory around this, once you've proven competency in an area, then use AI, right, to do that work. But don't use AI to do the work until you understand what work AI is going to do. And so you start with, hey, help me plan and understand the work that's going to be involved. And once you understand the work and why it's doing it with those Q&As, et cetera, then you move into, all right, now I'm going to offload some of that work to you.
There may be some audio issues. Um, Not
Are
sure
there?
if
Maybe.
everybody is. We have one person that's saying having trouble hearing you. I don't know if that
I
is
will
a
speak up.
consensus.
So as we go through and we look at our workflow, one of the things that we're going to look at is what are the boxes in that workflow? And I'm going to pick one of those boxes and go, okay, what do I want AI to never do? Never do. That's going to be a constraint I bake into my workflow. Where do I want AI to come back to the human for control? That's going to be something that I put in my workflow. What errors do I think AI is likely to make? Now, how would I know what errors AI is likely to make when I'm going into stage 3? Well, it's the places that in stage 2, AI gave me really bad answers. And that's why this is an incremental build of competency over time. Is you end up having this ability to go, oh, AI got this wrong when I was chatting with it, so I probably don't want to hand it the activity to go do those things. Now, I've done this for a couple of workflows inside our development structure, and I'm going, okay, code review, typically have a peer do it. Probably not going to start with code review, but I probably can start with like user story breakdown, breaking user stories down into tasks, etc. Now, when I start in permission mode, and I'm going to jump back and do this in a second, we're going to map that workflow to create a task agent. And then I'm going to have that task agent do some work for me. Now, what that looks like is over here in whichever tool you're using, you have the ability to create workflows. And I'm going to create a new one here, and I'm going to call this user story breakdown. And I would encourage you, if you're looking at tools like SpecKit, like BMAD, who have a ton of workflows and a ton of agents already built for you, don't start with those. You building your workflow, part of the exercise is learning what AI is good at and what it's bad at. And that exercise of learning is really hampered by these complex workflows that you don't really understand them all, but you're using them anyway. I would encourage you, build your own. And then once you get one that you trust, then start testing out some of those from the open source community, et cetera, as accelerants. But don't skip the learning. Very similar to that junior developer, you want to engage with the learning and then progress to productivity. And so in this case, I'm going to go, all right, I want to break down a user story into BDD specs in given when then format. Edge cases should be identified and included only if the user requests it. Never write code. Never include edge cases unless explicitly requested. Right? Now, I'm putting those in all caps because that's changing the way the AI is going to take that governance and guidance here. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to flip over into my stage 3 agent. Now, my stage 3 agent's still using that same chat system, but what I can do is go, all right, now my user story breakdown that I just created, I'm going to go as a user to skills with autocomplete. So I can fill out my profile. Now, while this is working, because it's going to take a minute to go through and do that breakdown and ask some questions, et cetera, I think it would be valuable if I showed you what I'm working on. So I'm working on improving employee portal experience. It's called Engage. And here is Engage. So under my profile, I've got my skills, I've got my experience, education, even public talks that I've given. This also includes our bonus programs and our goals, training classes, what's coming up. So this is our single pane of glass for improvers as their portal. And that's the system I'm working on right now. And so one of the things I want to do is kind of When I'm entering skills, give it autocomplete to make it a little easier. Nice little feature. We're going to ship it today. So you'll notice here, I now have my skill autocomplete, and I've got, here's my BDD side. Here's the user story, business rules. And now I'm reviewing this. Remember, in stage 3, the human's still doing a lot of active reviewing. Do I agree with 3 characters to trigger? Do I agree with the API call requirements or the SLA requirements? I'm like, you know what? I really don't want my user story just making up SLAs. So never make up performance requirements or SLAs. There we go. Now I'm going to save that, and I'm actually going to delete the thing I just did, because it's actually faster to have it recreate it than it is to then manually go edit it. And this is one of those weird things about going AI native is with autocomplete. And so now while that's kicking over, this is one of the weird things about going AI native is that I'm actually tooling my workflow until I get an output that's within about 5% of where I want to go. If it's more than 5% off, update your workflow and redo the work rather than taking all the time to manually edit and maintain it. Now, while this is doing this, notice it's going through, it's doing some work. And now I don't actually get a ton of those. I only get the details here. Fantastic. That's a stage 3 task agent. It only does one thing. It doesn't do the whole workflow. It just does that one box. So I can come back over here and go, okay, what does it take to go from stage 3 to stage 4? Now, I did see somebody raise their hand. I would ask, if you've got a question, please drop those in the Q&A feature. We've had all sorts of fun with trying to audio, et cetera, for the folks that are attending. So if you got a question or comment, put it in the Q&A feature and we'll definitely get it in there. The movement from stage 3 to stage 4, when I look at my workflow, do I have a stage 3 task agent for every box in my workflow? If I do, I'm probably ready for stage 4. If I don't, iterate on and create the rest of your stage 3 agents. And so when you do this, what you're doing is you're actually building and refining your opinions into your workflow, and you're making sure you've come to trust each piece of output before you roll out this huge workflow that's going to have all these different things moving around, and it's going to overcome your ability to review it. Now, by taking this approach, you're going to get productivity gains for every stage 3 agent you define. Those task agents are going to help you move faster. It helped me go through and plan here. It's just not going to do so much faster that I'm uncomfortable or I don't trust it. Now, once I've gotten there and I'm ready to go to stage 4, then I want to talk about governance structure. Now, before we do that, I saw a question come in. So would it be fair to say that AI will never replace native pilot input to operate in a corporate setting? In other words, even in stage 4, AI is never fully autonomous with driving decisions. Human intervention will remain critical. Human intervention and correction remains critical. The thing that changes as we go through these progressions through, say, stage 4 is where and how the human intervention is happening. And then stage 5 plus, it's how the human intervention causes the system to do rework. Whereas in stage 3 and 4, the human may be doing some of the rework. And so what we're going to see is that incremental shift to where humans are exerting control rather than a human losing control. Because I don't believe, and Improving doesn't believe, that we'll ever get to the point of removing the human expertise requirement of building enterprise software. Now, when I move into stage 4, it gets interesting for us, because governance by itself doesn't guarantee success. So having a governance framework, so all your tests have to pass, your builds have to pass, that's all part of a governance framework for a stage 4 agent. It's not enough, though. It does make it more likely to succeed, but the rest of the 55% is going to come from how you structure governance. And this is where your team and your team's definition of done and their opinions start to show up. Previously, it was about how I like to work. I like to work in BDD. I like to have test first development. My team's definition of what done means. What are our feature coverage requirements in testing? What's our build and deploy coverage? What's our PR and merge process? All of that starts to become much more important when you move into stage 4. This is incrementally making sure that we have the ability to gain the productivity of AI without losing the human pieces. And this, I answered kind of this already with the question that came up, but here's the slide and the pretty dots for it. And it is because we see multiplicative gain. We see humans being able to accelerate significantly if AI is used well. But if AI is used naively, we actually see a net negative impact. And that matches the McKinsey report from last August that said 80% of AI adoption and AI pilots were net negative to the business. I believe that is because most of them are approached naively. We start looking at AI as if it's magic rather than whether it's going to help us incrementally. One of the questions is, what are these percentages? This is actually based on the MIT Sloan review that says task efficiency. If I give an entry-level person a task, about 85% of the time, I get an acceptable result. If I give an AI, in this case, it was software development, with no human oversight, about 73% of the time do I get an acceptable result. But if I give a human an AI assist, so those stage 3 agents, I actually see the acceptable result rate go up to about 94%. And so the combination of human plus assistance gives us better outputs than either one, human or AI, by themselves. Now, the key shift in this is when we mapped out of all of our workflows, the workflow is the design for your coordinating agent. It's going to task each of your stage 3 task agents, but it's going to manage the arrows. Stage 3, those task agents are about the boxes. Stage 4 is about the arrows. How do you connect between the two? And so does the agent manage the development workflow? Does it manage the requirements management workflow? Those can be separate. It doesn't have to take over all software development across the board. And I would encourage you, don't let it. But all right, I've got my requirements gathering to user story with task breakdown workflow. I can create a stage 4 agent to do that. Now, this is also where I want to start capturing artifacts in between stages so that I have things like state management. I have the ability to intervene and review. I've got auditability of decisions. And these pieces create boundary enforcement for me. I'm also going to go, hey, if I got to be HIPAA compliant for this code base, I'm going to have a portion of that that's going to call a HIPAA compliance agent to help me write testing that ensures that I'm encrypting at rest, that I'm doing progressive disclosure, that I'm protecting the magic fields, all of those things. And so I end up with these combatively collaborative agents where one of them's reviewing and kicking work back proactively. And that's going to take governance from at the very beginning of the process. I define the governance process, the policy. I put that in SharePoint. Nobody ever reads it. And then compliance and audit at the end of the process, after all the work's done, smash me on the wrist and go, hey, you didn't obey the thing, go rework it. What we're going to try and do is take those bookends and make them active participants in the day-to-day process. That's going to lead us to having significantly higher value outputs. Now, when we do that, we have to then target our stage 3 agents that we already have, and we're going to build on top of them. And so I'm going to build a workflow agent, and I'm going to add in some governance hooks. I'm going to add in some state management and decision management. But I want to show you what that would look like as we go through this. We're going to be looking for, in stage 4 agents, things like audit trails, error handling. Like, what happens when the AI agent gets in trouble? Where do I want it to come to a human for approval? Because I'm not losing control, I'm defining where I want to exercise control in the process. And then I'm also going to go, all right, what's it allowed to do? What's it not? What are our quality gates? All of those fun bits. And so if I flip into, now keep in mind, stage 4 agents are still in the tool you do the work in. That's their defining factor of a stage 4 agent, is it's still inside the tool you're doing work in. So I'm still coding in this system here. And I'm going, all right, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to open up one of the workflows I use on a regular basis, which is my BDD workflow. So I'm a behavior-driven development person. I think it's a great way to approach software. And so what we're going to do is look at, all right, here's my workflow. You'll notice I mark them and I name them. This is a composite workflow. It's incrementing down to my task agents. And I've given it the cycle I want it to run into. And I've given it the practices for BDD. But you'll notice when I get into the workflow chain, I don't define the work it's going to do. I hand it over right here to a task agent. That's my stage 3 agent. Its job is to go, hey, go execute that agent and then review its outputs. And then call the next agent with those outputs. And then call the next agent with those outputs. And in this case, it's actually delegating to another stage 4 agent for TDD management. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is those auditability pieces. So state tracking, I actually am storing my state in process so that I can review it, I can look at it, I can analyze it, and I can correct it if I need to. And here's the different entry points, notifications, and where and how does it manage the output artifacts of this? And so features complete when these things happen. Remember, I said your team's definition of done shows up in your stage 4 agent. That's right here. There's documentation. Me as the stakeholder approves the behavior. Code coverage meets standards, which means it's going to run my code coverage for me. And then I get things like, hey, here's troubleshooting, things that you can do. Now, what that means is I'm going to come in here. I'm going to go, all right, let's do my BDD workflow against the skills autocomplete user story. And this stage 4 agent is going to start pulling apart that workflow. And it's going to go, awesome, I've already got this. I'm going to assess where I'm at. Features in phase 2, and it's going to start moving along that workflow. And it's going to start taking action and obeying each of those stage 3 agents as they execute, and then kicking back up to the stage 4 agent to do work. Notice it's saying, oh, I've got missing background context, recommended improvements, and away it's going. It's working through each of my stage 3 agents in this. Now that's going to take 15 or 20 minutes to work through that. So we're not going to watch it work, but you can see how stage 3 moves to stage 4 by defining the arrows. Where do I want progression? Where do I want awareness or approval or collaboration? And I'm defining those inside my orchestration. Now, stage 4 to 5 is the second big wall of kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in this progression. If I try and go from stage 2 to stage 3, I'm talking to AI. AI can do work that I'm going to be held accountable to. That's the stage 2 to 3 jump. That's pretty scary. Stage 4 to 5 is a shift of moving outside the tools I've used for years. These are like moving outside of Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, moving outside of IntelliJ or Eclipse if you're in the Java space. This is moving to somewhere I cannot see the work happening. I only get status and output. And that shift means that I have built enough trust in my stage 4 agents to be able to delegate workflows to them and know that they're going to do a good job and that they're going to ask me for details when they need them, but really no other time. And what that means is my agents and my workflows move out of my IDE into another tool. Now, there's a couple of different options in this tool. This could be command lines, etc. The mental shift here is important, but the hosting can change. This could be GitHub Copilot agents. This could be using something like Codex from OpenAI or Devin from Cognition. In our use case today, I'm going to be using Claude Code locally because it's easier to interact with on a demo machine like this. Now, I need to be able to shift into my coding system. And so this is what my new coding system looks like. And for clarity, I can use stage 4 and stage 5 simultaneously. I can hand some work off to a stage 5 agent and then do some more work in the IDE with a stage 4 agent. And we've got a ton of folks at Improving that do that on a daily basis. They take the work that they've got high trust in the workflows and they hand it off to a stage 5 agent. And where they have lower trust, they still work in an IDE with a stage 4 agent. Completely okay. But in this case, notice here, I've got my different skills and tools. I can fire this away. And so what I'm going to do is go implement using the BDD workflow, the skills auto complete story. And in this case, it's going to give me status. It's going to tell me what it's doing, and it's going to go look for the right markdown files. It's going to then read those. It's going to make sure, and it's going to incrementally work through that workflow. And notice it's giving me status, but it's not actually showing me any of the work it's doing right now. That transition means I'm going to check in with it every once in a while to see if it's asking me for guidance, but I'm probably not going to watch it work. I'm going to move it off and I'm going to go back to doing other things. This is where software development gained something that was not possible before a couple of years ago. When we moved to stage 6, I have the ability now to work on a bunch of things at once, because previously, software development, I was tied to one human, one workflow. I could script some stuff, etc., but it was still primarily one human, one piece of work. I could pick up a story off the backlog, I'd work it, I'd get done. If somebody at Scrum had stood up and gone, hey, I'm taking these 7 stories today, you might look at them a little cross-eyed. Whereas with stage 6 agents, that's a normal occurrence. And what ends up happening is I'm now managing an entire team of agents on my laptop. I have all the problems of a team working collaboratively on a code base on my laptop now, because I need to have the ability to isolate work for each of those agents. And I can use branches, I can use multiple copies of the code base, I can even use GitHub work trees, but you've got to create a way to isolate change. I also need a way to view status for all those agents. Now, my current way of viewing status for those agents is looking at where each of those agents is and just clicking here and checking in. That works. I can do that. Now, when I get to 6 or 7 agents, clicking in and checking gets a little tough. I have to remember, oh, what was that agent working on? Oh, yeah, what was that agent working on? And gets a little harder to manage. But then I also need a way to integrate those changes either on my machine or in Git. And so I can use GitHub pull requests and have a review cycle and those kind of things. Or I can merge them locally if I want to kind of merge and test and integrate locally. I can spin up separate Docker dev environments. But these become the problems that I'm facing as I move into coordinating and orchestrating away from individual interaction. Now, when you do this, I've got to handle the convergence side of it. And typically that's a convergence workflow. And so my stage 6 agents, I'm firing off based on the work output and integration. I'm kind of moving out of the do the work workflows, that's stage 5, into the combining and organizing and tasking the work, task assignment, converging the materials, testing, etc. That loop, I've kind of moved above the work being done into how I coordinate the work being done. And so what I end up looking like is I'm looking at managing this. I got an agent working at running that feature and creating it. I've got a test agent that's writing a test integration suite against it. I got a docs agent that's re-documenting the last feature I worked on. And this ends up becoming what I manage. That looks like this for me on the Engage platform. Yours will look different, but I put this one in here so that you have an understanding of what you're choosing when you move into this space. We have a research and analysis agents that go through, and when we say, hey, I want a feature to do X, Y, and Z, I can fire that off to a research agent and an analysis agent, and they're going to do some UX design. They're going to do some research on different ways that people approach this in the market using web search, et cetera. And that's going to be highly collaborative with me as a human. There's some really good agents and workflows in BMAD for requirements elicitation and product documentation. I love them. I use them all the time. I would encourage you to take a look at those once you get to stage 5. And then I get out of that highly collaborative space into planning, and I go, hey, go off and plan. And it comes back with a plan. I then review that, accept it, approve it, tell it to change it. And then I kick it off to all of the execution agents. The execution agents are doing an awful lot of work without really talking back to me at any point in that. And then they get to a completed increment of work and they hand those over to me. And I look at them, I test them, I run them, I review them like a PO would. And then I go, yeah, go ahead and merge those up and deploy them. And so I'm in that meta tasking. Your team may have more human interaction steps, might have less. You might have more workflow steps, might have less. But as you've progressed from 2 to 6, you've defined all of these pieces, because the ones you see here are stage 4 agents. Underneath there are dozens of stage 3 agents. To a team, this is going to incrementally change the way you're structured when you get to this point. Remember, I said stages 1 through 4 were kind of faster agile, is what we were really seeing. At stage 5 and 6, team structure starts to change, because the teams on the right, each one of them is about as fast as the team on the left was. So we're getting a lot of productivity gain, but it's changing the roles. The product definer, that could be a BA who's using research agents to fill in some of the product thing, and that research agent's talking to your help desk history and your user feedback system, your web research, whatever those things are. And they're using that to go all the way down to things like PRDs, product requirement documents and product vision structures and epics and stories. So they're able to do a huge amount of work. Well, that's good, because that productivity gain I'm getting, I'm going to outrun my traditional product owner structure. Our UX often appears up there as a part of that definition process of, are we building the right things in the right ways? And then you have that lead builder. Now, the lead builder kind of is the tech lead persona with a couple of additional pieces. They're also building the workflow and task agents that everybody else is using, and they're kind of responsible for enhancing them, managing them, adjusting them. And then you have those builders. Those builders could be a traditional QA person who's using tests as a way to guide the AI to write code. They could be a traditional development person who's using code as a way to guide the AI into writing tests. And that's where you see this fuzzing of the areas, where specialty becomes the thing you're deeply expertise on, but you've gained general ability in the things related to and around it. The shared services start shifting, whereas enterprise like security and enterprise architecture become agents that are delivered into your workflow that are going, hey, I'm going to proactively make sure you're following the enterprise patterns and help your agents build software that's in line with our enterprise architecture, rather than going and smashing you on the fingers later because you didn't do that. cybersecurity, vulnerability scanning, those all start to show up in those shared services as well. So I'm going to pause here. There was a question that just came through that I thought was really important. I'm wondering how this works in a world where most of us are that has many existing siloed and protected systems that make the AI native operation look like you've got to disregard everything and start over. Can we live in a hybrid world where we have, say, Salesforce, existing legacy code, and you start innovation eventually develops into this kind of full structure? Yes. You may only ever get to stage 4. That's okay. You're going to get a ton of uplift. And as you progress into those kind of, you're building task agents, you're building workflow agents, you may go, you know what, that's good enough. You may also look at it and go, oh, it turns out jumping from stage 4 to stage 5 or 6 wasn't as hard as I thought it was, because once you get the learning of going through stage 3, 4, getting there, you may realize, oh, well, it turns out I can actually do that orchestration over here, even though our code base is in Salesforce or I've got existing legacy platforms, because I'm now working up level or down level effectively, and I'm able to guide that. I do want to stress one point in that, which is not every team should have the goal of getting to stage 8 in the adoption cycle. It's going to be based on the precision needed in the work, the existing tech stack. Every team should have the goal of getting as far along the adoption cycle as is appropriate to the work they're doing. Most of us will end up in stage 3 or 4 in the next several years. I don't know if everybody's going to go 5+. Another question came in and said, I realize this focused on enterprise software development. Are there examples about doing this with like infrastructure level development, infrastructure as code, et cetera? Yes. What we typically see is 2 different approaches. If I'm in like a infrastructure group where I'm talking about observability and true platform engineering and orchestration, like I got some solid Kubernetes going on, then I'm doing that work, and that might be Terraform, that might be Bicep, that might be Kube orchestration structures, but the code I'm writing is coming out in a different language, but these processes still work. And so task-based may be, all right, take this application, analyze it, and create a plan for moving it into containerized deployment on Azure, or, hey, I want to create a script to copy back and do a production reset into my UAT environment. And so you end up seeing these platform engineering type tasks and infrastructure development becoming more and more like software development, because that infrastructure as code approach is making the code you're writing simply be moving the platform along. And then lastly, another question that came in is, do we recommend standardizing this at a team or organizational level rather than an individual engineer? I believe workflows at stage 3 can be individual engineer preference. And I have a ton of stage 3 agents that my teams just don't like. Like that's how I think about problems and I write code. That's not how teams do. At stage 4, you do need to come together as a team around what those workflows look like. At an organization, I would say that the inputs to stage 5 and above become very organizationally centric. Like, what are agents allowed to do when it comes to paving out and deploying test environments? What are they allowed to do when it comes to PR reviews and cycles? And so as you go up, the organizational standards become broader, because at stage 5 and stage 6, I also need things like organizational security and compliance agents involved in those answers. So the lower you are on that adoption scale, the more personalized it can be. But as you go up, your problem space gets bigger, and that's where you need organizational standards to come in. Now, I do want to touch on this before I dive into showing you what this would look like, because stage 7 and 8 is mostly, for the vast majority of software developers today, theoretical. It is possible today. Very few teams, individuals, or organizations have gone through the cycle enough to get to a point where they have trust and infrastructure and governance to be able to accomplish stage 7 and stage 8 maturity in this. I'm going to show you what that looks like for improving on our internal tools. Keep in mind, this isn't what we would do for every project. It's what we do for these specifically selected projects where this is the appropriate answer. So here is what that stage 7 and 8 coordination looks like. I have my repositories here, and my repository, when it comes in, gets things like tech stack, architecture, project structure automatically scanned in, ready to go. I can come in here and go, all right, I want to take this ability to a resume and update without duplication and destruction the user profile from that resume. And so in this, I can fire up a deep exploration agent. This is firing out my entire requirements gathering workflow with research agent, etc. If it has questions about intent, it then comes back to me. That's going to turn into these stories, tasks, like all of the backlog scaffolding. Keep in mind, this is built on top of our stage 3, 4, 5, 6 workflows. And then from here, I can actually start going, hey, I want you to move this one into requirements elicitation and expand it. And then once it's doing that, it's deploying a ton of different agents, skills, and workflows. These are all of our stage 3, 4, and 5 agent skills and workflows. And I'm interacting with it through the messaging system. Where does it need guidance? Where does it need approval? And it's executing this across an entire pipeline of agents and shipping features by itself. And when it's ready for merge, it comes here and goes, all right, I got a PR ready for a feature to ship. At the pinnacle of what's currently possible, that's the extreme edge. There are no standards in that space. It's still kind of Wild West, but I think in the next 10 to 15 years, that's going to be where we go for about half of software development. The work where it just needs done, but you don't need super high precision. Maybe you don't need like excellence. Average is okay. A lot of that work's going to get deployed out in that kind of 7 and 8 orchestration once the industry reaches maturity. That meta orchestrator that's assigning all that work used to be me in that stage 6 space. And so now we've created an AI agent who's proxying me to delegate, assign, and coordinate work. My job at that point shifts into defining the goal and answering questions and becoming the human checkpoint before those progressions are allowed. Now, depending on where you're at, you've got a couple of different key things to go tackle. If you're in stage 2, it's about building trust by defining those task agents. You map the workflow, pick one, define it until you get comfortable. Don't move on to another one. Once you're comfortable, you move on to the next. If you're going from stage 3 to 4, it's about knowing, all right, in this workflow, do I have all the agents I need to coordinate the whole workflow? If not, you're still going to be cranking through stage 3. Once you've got them all, now it's, all right, we've got all the boxes. Let's start filling in the arrows. Stage 4 to 5 is a big jump organizationally because that's where I disconnect from being able to see the work as it's happening. I'm getting status and output only. 5 to 6, I've got to worry about isolation, parallel work, merging, all of that fun. And then 7 plus, I have to disconnect from the how. I define the acceptable level of how. I define the minimum bar, and I define what needs to be done and why we're doing it. And I let the rest fall through. So your next step should be pretty apparent at this point, hopefully. Identifying that next stage. Based on where everybody's at, you're probably in stage 3 right now. How do you get from stage 2 or 3 to stage 4, building out those task agents and workflow agents, and then starting to build out governance before you scale. Because if you scale ahead of your governance structure, you'll end up creating a ton of work slop, and you'll create a bunch of vibe coding mistakes that you won't know until they're already out there. Now, if you need help in doing this, Improving actually does this for teams and can go from kind of the 1-2 space to stage 4 in about 12 weeks. It doesn't take long if you approach it intentionally and work on it every day, every week. It takes a lot longer if it's haphazard or individually driven as experiments. So I want to pause here and answer some questions that folks might still have, open the floor up and go, all right, hey, where are we at as a group? I know that there have been some interesting questions that have come through that I'm going to probably preempt. When we talk about higher level automation, one of the questions that we got earlier today was, do I recommend Claude Opus or Claude Sonnet? Which models would you use? It's actually not about which model. It's about the type of model. So like Claude Opus is a thinking and reasoning model, which is great for things like planning and requirements gathering and expansion, but pretty bad at task execution. And so what we end up doing is going, all right, we're going to use Sonnet for the coding tasks, the testing tasks, those kind of things. And we're going to use Opus for planning and requirements. In ChatGPT, this would be, we're going to use 5.3 mini on writing code and tests, but we're going to use 5.3 high reasoning on planning and elicitation.
So how do you future proof that decision? In 12 weeks, Sonnet could be behind the curve.
Absolutely. And I love this question because guaranteed there will be a new market leader in the future. Guaranteed. The models will change. So what we do is we build for tools that allow us to augment in models. So like Windsurf, I can pick the models and they ship new ones on a regular basis. Cognition, Devin and Windsurf. Cursor, same thing. I can select the models. The tools that are model specific, you got to have a really good reason for standardizing there. Anthropic is probably market leader in software development models today, just ahead of OpenAI. But I like the tools that allow me to use Anthropic models, but don't tie me to them, that allow me to use OpenAI models, but don't tie me to them. So I'd encourage you to look at like GitHub Copilot. I can switch models there. I can bring my own API key. I can use different models in Cursor. I can use different models in Windsurf. I'd say that'd be where I'd go for my future proofing, because I have CLI options or command line options in most of those at this point, if not today, within the next couple of weeks in all of those.
Awesome. Do you have a gauge for deciding the smallest unit of work for a stage 2 or 3?
So it's a great question. I don't have one for stage 2 because stage 2 is largely about answering questions and exploratory. It's not actually doing work. But what I would say in stage 3 is if a task that you break down a story into tasks, if that task is about an hour of your work, it's pretty good to aim a stage 3 agent at. If it's more than an hour, hold off. And that's why, so for me, the first stage 3 agent I built was my TDD create a failing test. It was the first one. Because it would typically take me 20, 30 minutes to design a good failing test. And then I'd go from there. And once I got really good failing tests, it was like, okay, my next task agent was then go write the code to pass the test. And so I would say anything where you're right about an hour or under is a pretty good stage 3 target.
Awesome. All right. We have organizational hesitancy about using cloud-based LLMs because of privacy. We have some self-hosted LLM capability. Thoughts on privacy and intellectual property or self-hosting?
So a couple of good things in this, but just I want to tie into a couple of things. Cloud-based is going to be where the best models are and it's also going to be where your lowest cost of operations is going to be. And so when you go to local, keep in mind that's going to be you're going to be on lower end models, and you're going to have a higher operational cost. Now, all of that being said, you can use something like Ollama or LM Studio and open code to 100% run this whole workflow that I just talked you through on your laptop. It will be much slower than it is if I'm using a cloud host, but you can do that. And there are some pretty good local model coding systems like StarCoder, DeepSeek R2. When you're running those locally, you don't have that cloud-based data privacy problem. If, however, you have an approved cloud where you're okay with it, like Microsoft, AWS, or Google, they allow you to host models in those clouds. So, like my Claude Code, I can actually run all the Claude models through our Microsoft cloud subscription on Azure, and it stays inside Improving's Azure environment. And so you don't have to go to a third-party cloud host. You might be able to go to one of the hyperscalers that you already trust if you already have that trusted relationship with one of the hyperscalers pretty easily.
Okay. Circling back to conversation on Windsurf, how does Windsurf alert you to that you need to change?
Need to change. I'm not sure I understand the question. So Cheryl, you may be able to correct as we go through this. But when Windsurf's detecting problems or going, hey, you've got conflicting advice, you've got conflicting guidance, it will ask for clarification because I've told it, hey, anytime you have conflicts, raise them up to human review, etc. It doesn't alert you that you need to change models. That's a human piece. Now, there are some of the tools that allow you to do what's called model aware workflows, where you can target a specific workflow to use a type of model. That's harder. But in this case, if I were in Windsurf, my model selection is right down here. And so I can actually, and you'll notice it's grouped by relative cost. I can also group it by provider if I wanted to. And so I've got a ton of different options here, like a lot, and I can flip back and forth between these. And so what I typically use is I'll use the Sonnet thinking models if I'm going cheap. I'll use the Opus thinking models if I'm going expensive. But almost all of your tooling nowadays has this little model selector right here that allows you to do that.
She said you answered the question, so thank you for that.
Awesome.
Thanks for that clarification, Cheryl. All right. What happens when you're at a stage 6, 7, or 8 for a while, and what you're building now needs a new way of building it? All of your development is written into workflows you proved out a while ago, designed to the preferences of people who don't do that workflow work manually anymore, and maybe aren't at the company either. As you get to higher levels, are your orchestrator agents redefining the workflows and perhaps parts of your governance structure on their own to meet the new need?
So this is a phenomenal question, and I'm gonna dig in and answer it. I will say it's a pretty small group of people who are in this space, but Rich loved the question. So at stage 7 and 8, the agents are self-regressive. And what I mean by that is, so in here, if I have mistakes that my agents are making, I actually am capturing those and going, okay, there's architectural summaries from intake. These memories, when it makes a mistake, it flags the coordinator to go update the instructions inside that agent to avoid that mistake again in the future. And then once the mistake has been solved, it'll actually decay the memory and remove it from that process. So you do end up with these self-regressive systems that are going through and working. But that's very much a stage 7 and 8 approach, because you've learned how to correct those models and correct those agents and workflows through doing it in the growth from 2 to 6. And you've encapsulated that change management approach into your stage 7 coordinator.
All right. Any opinion or research on OpenClaw? Understanding that they have major security issues, but seems like the first generation of a stage 7 or 8 tools, i.e., they will get better fast.
Oh, I love this question. Somebody was going to bring up OpenClaw. Fantastic. So what I would say is OpenClaw is the first public sourced stage 3 collection of actions with a generic stage 4 system. Um, Now, keep in mind with OpenClaw, when I load a skill or something like that, I didn't actually take in the learning from it, which is where some of the security problems come in. And it's working inside that sandbox or that isolation, or I give it control of my machine, but it's a generic stage 4 assistant with a bunch of stage 3 that it's getting off that community host. I'm actually really looking forward to what potentially a stage 5 or 6 piece would look like, because the stage 5 or 6 piece of executing those workflows in a hosted way would mean I could run OpenClaw in a cloud environment that doesn't require physical hardware and be able to have the hosted interconnection with things like M365 or Google and my coding system and my email. And I could set up those larger orchestration loops. I think they'll get there, but those security issues are very real. When a lot of people hold off on engaging with AI at all for data privacy, very few organizations are going to be comfortable with standing up something with that amount of power if it doesn't have a very deeply integrated governance and security system.
Fantastic. Right. You mentioned the first 4 or so stages as enabling sort of a faster agile process. Companies sometimes struggle with adopting an agile process for various reasons. If a company is not successfully running agile now, would adding more dev item capacity be beneficial?
I think so. So I believe AI is breaking down some of the fundamental design concepts of the Agile Manifesto. Now, if you're not deep in the Agile space, I'm going to give you a brief summary. When we were originally building software, we went, all right, comprehensive documentation, because we really deeply had to understand it, and adherence to a plan, and right, all of these things. And then as we got faster and better at building software, we went, all right, that stuff's still good, but we want working software over comprehensive documentation. We want responding to change over adherence to a plan, because we were responding to new design constraints caused by the speed up of work. I believe AI is actually removing the greater than sign between those values and making it an equal sign and going, I want both working software and comprehensive documentation. I want both responsive to change and adherence to a plan, because AI needs the plan to be able to respond to change. And so you're actually seeing this leveling where whether you're a mature agile shop or you've got a really mature PMO, you're going to have to grow the other side of the competency. Agile shops will actually need to get much more comfortable with things like detailed task planning and comprehensive documentation and probably over definition of design, because it makes AI more successful. And so I think we're actually seeing this blend of the two caused by the acceleration of technology. I don't know what to call that new workflow process structure. Maybe Jeff Sutherland can get together with his friends and come up with a new name. But I think that's where we're progressing to. And that's where the team design and getting more customer centricity, but not losing those expertises, is going to play in pretty heavily.
Where have you seen feedback from secure code review tools? For an example, SNYK, I don't want to butcher the name, Incorporated.
SNCC. Yep. So I love this, because here's the thing. When we talk about governance infrastructure and these agents and coordination, that doesn't have to be agents you've built. I can integrate SonarQube. I can integrate DependBot and SNCC. I can even integrate dependency scanning, copyright scanning as a part of my process by equipping my agent with those tools, because agents can still call those tools. And so what you end up doing is, if you have some of those tools in your default workflows today, you can have the agents leverage them. And if you don't have them in your workflows today, the agent might be the way you integrate them. And so it ends up creating a lot more input that allows the agents to create better outputs. So I'm a huge fan of bringing that whole DevOps ecosystem as close to the iron on the code as possible and taking governance and compliance from like a definitional at front and a scan at the other end and making it an active part of the entire process. I think AI is going to force us into what DevOps and SRE have been telling us for years, which is the further you shift left, the better the outcomes.
Awesome. All right, we've got some time for a few more questions if anybody wants to pop those into the chat for Devlin or into the Q&A feature.
So while we're going there, I know there's been some phenomenal questions and those kind of things. A couple of deals. Yes, we'll be sending out kind of slides. We also have the video we can share. And so you'll be seeing some of those details come out. If you're struggling on this journey or you're approaching this journey, please reach out. We're definitely here to help. We've helped a bunch of companies go through this and a bunch of teams go through this. We can save you from stepping on the landmines that we've already lost a leg on. And hopefully that's valuable to everybody. But I really appreciate everybody taking a little bit of time out of your afternoon and spending it with us. I saw that we got one last question coming through, and we'll wrap it up after that one.
Sounds good. All right. Speaking of code developed in other places, how have you seen innovation development, code developed not in our product engineering team, been accepted or injected into the legacy product team and get over the not invented here problem?
That's tough. And when I say tough, it is a buddy of mine, Tim Rayburn, introduced me to what he called the hierarchy of pain. And the hierarchy of pain basically has at the top of the pyramid has technology problems, and then you have process problems underneath it, and then you have team problems, and then you have character problems. And he supposed, and I believe it to be true, that you can never solve a problem by going up the pyramid. You always have to solve it at the level the problem exists or below. I don't think there's a technology or process solution that will solve a team with not invented here. I think you have to have a OCM and a kind of psychology based approach to getting the team to value the productivity and the gain more than they value the creation of the thing. And that's a tough organizational change management conversation, but I don't know that technology is going to help turn that corner. From the outside in. What you can do is get them to start leveraging the tech. Because if I'm allowing an agent to write code for me, then Bob down the hall writing code for me is also easy to accept. But if I'm writing all of it, it's really hard to get any outside code to be as good as I would do it. And so I would say potentially getting them along this path might soften that ground for the R&D team being able to hand off to the support and legacy product teams. And with that, thank you everybody for spending some time with us this afternoon. If you have any additional questions, please reach out, email me, email our team at sales@improving.com, and they'll get a hold of me, and we'll make sure to get any of those follow-up questions answered. Look forward to seeing you the next time we do something like this.